Judy Garland's dangerous addictions began at a young age, but the saddest part was who enabled her in the first place. The cruel injustices of Judy Garland's childhood only led her to fall from grace, an adulthood filled with suffering and oppression. Despite her overwhelming talent, Garland's celebrity lifestyle never gave her a fighting chance. With no yellow brick road in sight, she took a darker path, one that led her far from home and straight into unforeseen danger. Whether she liked it or not, Judy Garland was always destined for show business. Born to two vaudeville performers on June 10, 1922, it was only a matter of time before she took the stage. But Garland wasn't born a star. In fact, with a given name like Frances Ethel Gum, she certainly wasn't virtuoso material just yet. Unbeknownst to this little performer, the road to stardom would prove far more horrifying than she ever expected. When she was only 2 years old, Frances started performing in her father's movie theater alongside her two older sisters, Mary Jane and Virginia, and for the next 2 years they made regular appearances accompanied by their mother on piano. Music and dance colored little Frances's life, but it was only too soon before a terrible scandal changed everything. In 1926, shocking rumors about her father's relations with young boys appended her life. Frances and her family escaped the whispers and set up shop in Lancaster, but the damage was already done. Frances watched in dismay as her parents' marriage fell apart. Frances's mother Ethel, on the other hand, focused all her energy on grooming her 3 daughters into budding stars. At the mercy of her controlling mother, Frances's tribulations had only just begun. Frances's first introduction to substances came directly from the palm of her mother, whom she later called the real Wicked Witch of the West. To keep her performance ready, Ethel started Frances on a dangerous regime. She took a dose of uppers in the morning to get her going, and then sleeping pills in the evening to calm her down. But this was an extremely slippery slope, and down the line, this led to utter disaster. Frances spent her childhood performing with her siblings as the Gum Sisters, but it soon became glaringly obvious that Gum just wasn't the most appealing stage name. In 1935, the Gum Sisters changed their name to something more star-worthy, the Garland Sisters. But it wasn't long before they realized that only one of them was the real star of the show, and that was undoubtedly Frances. But the changes didn't end there. Frances decided to change her name to Judy. Posed at the ready with her new name, Judy Garland took to the stage, and this time, somebody very important noticed her. During one of the Garland sisters' acts, a very intent audience member couldn't keep his eyes off little Judy Garland. Songwriter Burton Lane had been sent by Louis B. Mayer to attend the act and report back to him. Of course, because of her sparkling performance, Lane only gravitated toward Judy. With this recommendation, her life would never be the same. Only a few days later, Garland found herself facing the unknown. Smack dab in the middle of an audition at the Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer studios, she sang with every ounce of passion she could muster. Garland's voice was an absolute revelation. Judy's audition blew everyone away, and they signed her immediately. They were so enthusiastic about her audition that they didn't even bother with a screen test. But even as they rejoiced in finding this diamond in the rough, the studio still had a dilemma. At 13 years old, Garland was far too old to be a child actor, and still too young to be a full-blown starlet. Of course, her age wasn't the only problem. Judy Garland was a tiny little thing, coming in at 4 feet 11.5 inches, and her studio immediately roped her with the cutesy girl-next-door actresses. She certainly didn't seem to fit in with the other leading ladies of the time. Always set apart from her contemporaries, this exclusion was a serious blow to her self-esteem. Sadly, Louis B. Mayer insisted on calling Garland his little hunchback, and when she attended school at Metro, she constantly compared herself to gorgeous peers. The studio even went so far as to change her facial features, using caps for her teeth and rubber prosthetics to change the shape of her nose. During her early days of stardom, the studio insisted on dressing Garland in little girl outfits, understated by sometimes frilly. As Charles Walters, one of her directors, remembered, Judy was the big moneymaker at the time, a big success, but she was the ugly duckling. I think it had a very damaging effect on her emotionally for a long time. I think it lasted forever, really. Just as her new daunting chapter in show business began, Garland faced a distressing tragedy. Right before one of her first professional radio renditions, she learned that her father had taken ill and was in hospital, suffering from meningitis. He listened to her radio performance while he lay dying. The following morning, he passed, leaving Garland devastated. As she bid a tearful goodbye to her father, she set off to make her mark. During her first years at MGM, Judy Garland came up against her #1 competitor, pretty blonde opera singer Deanna Durbin. Garland and Durbin were very different. Many believed that the studio was weighing its options and that eventually only one of the girls would be kept on. As such, their talents were about to be put to the test. Both Garland and Durbin were cast opposite one another in the short musical Every Sunday. With their singing chops placed side by side, it was easier for the studio to get a better handle on which girl they preferred. In the end, of course, there was just something about Garland that stole the show. From here on out, she'd only continue to prove them right. When she was 14, Garland made a very special appearance. She performed at Clark Gable's birthday party, singing "You Made Me Love You" for the megastar, earning both his approval and a kiss of gratitude. Louis B. Mayer also delighted in her rendition, and after the ringing applause calmed down, he welcomed her into his lap with open arms. After this, Judy Garland's career kicked into high gear. Behind the polished exterior of MGM, there were nefarious dealings afoot. Garland claimed that she, along with many others, were consistently prescribed amphetamines to help them endure their heavy work schedules. Later on, she claimed that these prescriptions only led to her debilitating addictions and severe health problems. But this was only the tip of the iceberg. Already feeling the odd one out, Garland faced more of her studio's criticisms. Convinced she was too heavy, they put her on a strict and absolutely ridiculous diet. On one occasion, she tried to order a healthy-sized meal. They presented her with a sad fare of lettuce and soup. From then on, no amount of reassurance could make Judy Garland feel truly beautiful. In the midst of all this, Garland came up against an even more sinister side of the business, one that didn't come to light until her unfinished biography was discovered. Once Garland turned 16, she became aware of the grosser side of Hollywood. Men asked her into their bedroom time and time again. The greatest perpetrator? Louis B. Mayer himself. Soon, Mayer's disgusting behavior became the everyday norm. But no matter how many times Garland endured his advances, she never gave him what he wanted.
For exclusive perks like early access to new videos, priority replies to your comments, and to have your say on future content, consider becoming a Factinate member. On top of that, your support helps keep the channel going. Click the link in the description for more details.
In 1938, Judy Garland landed her most iconic role, Dorothy Gale, in The Wizard of Oz. To Garland's horror, she endured even more unsolicited advances while on the set of The Wizard of Oz. This time, it was at the hands of many of the male actors playing Munchkins. One of her husbands later admitted in his memoir, they would make Judy's life miserable on set by putting their hands under her dress. Before she knew it, this dreamland set quickly became her worst nightmare. Garland's character, Dorothy, almost had a completely different look. Can you imagine her prancing down the yellow brick road wearing a curly blonde wig? Although they scrapped the blonde locks, the studio definitely kept the recognizable blue dress. They chose the pattern for its blurring effect on camera. Most importantly, the dress helped slim down Garland's womanly curves. But this wasn't the studio's only tactic for keeping Garland's youthful figure in check. Along with the diet and the dress, Garland also had a rigorous athletic regime. The studio sent her on active outings to help keep her weight down. She went swimming and hiking, and often played tennis or badminton with her stunt double. But as she struggled to make the mark behind the scenes, her shining performance in The Wizard of Oz spoke for itself. In 1939, Garland won her first and only Academy Award for her two brilliant performances that year, The Wizard of Oz and Babes in Arms. But as the new decade began, she began landing more adult roles. This led to a whole host of challenges she'd never foreseen. For one, she'd never been a romantic interest, neither on screen or in her private life. This was about to change. With her role in Little Nellie Kelly, Garland faced her most difficult role yet. She had to learn an accent, deliver her very first on-screen kiss, and enact a believable death scene. But she wasn't the only one unnerved by these daunting tasks. Even her co-star, George Murphy, found a way to insult her amateur attempts at intimacy and admitted that their kiss was humiliating. He said it was like a hillbilly with a child bride. But this on-screen disappointment was only a taster for the real-life heartbreak to come. When Garland met musician David Rose, he was still a married man. Still, that didn't stop the enthusiastic Rose from proposing to Garland the moment she turned 18. When the studio found out that an older married man was trying to sweep Garland off her feet, they stepped in and forbade the marriage until Rose could secure a proper divorce. In the meantime, Garland had options. Garland and Rose decided to wait a year before tying the knot, but in the interim, Garland pursued a hot-blooded affair with another man. Truly taken by musicians, she pursued Johnny Mercer, a 30-year-old songwriter who also just happened to be married. Even by Hollywood standards, this relationship had scandal written all over it. Despite the briefness of their affair, Mercer fell deeply in love with Garland, and even wrote a song especially for her. His song, I Remember You, boasts some tell-all lyrics such as, "You're the one who made my dreams come true." But the couple's considerable age difference had tongues wagging, and many of their friends urged them to end it. Even though Garland and Mercer were never meant to last, Mercer never forgot her. When David Rose finally showed up with his divorce in hand, Garland was ready to say I do. However, Garland's studio was not happy about this union, and they were even more incensed when, in 1941, she became pregnant. Judy Garland's baby face and virginal roles were everything to them. If she was a mother, how would audiences react? Would they still love her? Not wanting to take a risk, both Garland's mother and her studio pressured her, if not forced her, to get an abortion. But this wasn't the last time. In 1943, she became pregnant again during a torrid affair with Tyrone Power. Just like before, her studio didn't allow her to keep the baby. As time wore on, this constant control only damaged Garland's mental health and even threatened her marriage. Garland and Rose's passion for music just wasn't enough to sustain the romantic spark. In every other way, these two were opposites. With him encouraging his wife to get an abortion, it only made matters worse. By 1944, the marriage passed the point of no return, and they divorced. But in the wake of Garland's loss, brighter times were coming. In 1944, Judy Garland starred in one of MGM's greatest successes, Meet Me in St. Louis. This was one of the first times she'd been offered the role of the leading lady and romantic interest. Thanks to her assigned makeup artist, Garland also got a brand new look. When she looked in the mirror, she couldn't believe her eyes. She was perfectly beautiful with outer teeth caps and nose discs. In the film, nobody can forget Garland's hauntingly beautiful rendition of Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. Wearing a stunning red dress and light string of pearls, Garland blinks her doe eyes at the camera, captivating her audience from the get-go. Her performance plucks all the heartstrings, and when she starts to sing, you can't look away. Everything about Garland was magnetic, so it's no wonder that her charms attracted attention off-screen. Vincent Minnelli directed Garland in Meet Me in St. Louis, and he was, in fact, responsible for making sure she got her famous makeover. He recognized that she had more to offer than a girl next door performance. This opened up a whole new audience for Garland. Although director and actress reportedly clashed in the beginning, by 1945, they were well on their way to a blossoming romance. On June 15, 1945, Garland and Minnelli married and embarked on a new chapter of wedded bliss. The very next year, Garland found out she was pregnant, and to her delight, her studio allowed her to keep the baby. Everything seemed to be going smoothly for Garland, but behind the happy family facade, her mental health rapidly declined. Garland was at her wit's end and wanted to end it all, and so she attempted to take her life for the very first time with some broken glass. Thankfully, the cuts were minor and she survived the attempt. It did, however, land her in treatment, as well as a short stay in a psychiatric hospital. But this was only the beginning. During the filming of her next project, Garland and director Busby Berkeley clashed on all fronts. But he wasn't her only adversary. In fact, Garland soon became her own worst enemy. Her insecurities were off the charts and she was increasingly anxious about playing an unglamorous character. the title role of Annie Oakley in Annie Get Your Gun. For Garland, the whole experience was a total train wreck. Berkeley really had it out for Garland. He bullied her for her poor behavior and felt like she didn't bring a positive attitude to set. As a result of her failing mental health, she started showing up late. There were 7 days where she didn't even show up at all. Finally, the studio put its foot down and fired Garland outright. With no choice but to grapple with her mounting issues, Judy Garland vowed to make a change. Garland, desperate to make a full recovery, went to a hospital in Boston where doctors tried to regulate her eating and sleeping patterns. Most importantly, they had to get Garland clean. They took her drug problem seriously and slowly weaned her off many of her medications. Just as Judy Garland had returned to Los Angeles hoping for a new lease on life, disaster struck. She was heavier, healthier, and most importantly, happier. But the only thing her studio saw was her weight. Once again, Garland found herself drowning in the pressure to shed the pounds and turned back to pills in order to get the job done. After her part in Royal Wedding fell through, Garland surrendered to her depression. On one disturbing occasion, she tried to hurt herself, making an incision on her neck with a broken piece of glass. While the injury was minor, the press splashed it all over the news, making her attempt seem far more gruesome than it actually was. Judy Garland had worked with MGM for 15 years, and they had seen her through her childhood and early adulthood. And while her performances throughout the last decade had its ups and downs, in the end, she became a total liability. In September of 1950, she and her studio parted ways. The very next year, her marriage also imploded. Soon, Garland found herself in a desperate situation. Without Hollywood support, her finances began to dwindle, and she needed to find a way to jumpstart her career. Thankfully, she had a close friend on her side, none other than Bing Crosby himself. Seeing a friend in need, he came to her rescue and invited her onto his radio show. But even though she was grateful for the opportunity, she was also absolutely terrified. When Bing Crosby learned of her distress, he gave her all the strength she needed. Crosby gave her the most welcoming introduction. "We got a friend here. She's had a little trouble recently. You probably heard about it. Everything is fine now. She needs our love. She needs our support. She's here. Let's give it to her, okay? Here's Judy." For Garland, stepping into the limelight was like stepping into a second skin. It fit her perfectly. Her appearance on Bing Crosby's show was a complete success, and in the wake of her break from Hollywood, returned to the stage in all her glory. In 1952, Garland wed Luft, and the same year they welcomed their first child, a daughter named Lorna. Knowing that Garland was more than capable of wooing an audience, Luft thought it was time for her to make her Hollywood comeback. The couple decided to produce the film A Star is Born with Warner Brothers. Garland and Luft seriously hoped that A Star is Born would help give their finances a boost, but they were sorely mistaken. As filming began, Garland started falling back into her old ways, causing delays and seriously disrupting production. Once filming wrapped, all they could do was cross their fingers and hope for the best. The release of A Star is Born wasn't a total bust, because thankfully, audiences absolutely adored it. Still, due to the staggering cost of production, the film didn't even see a profit. By 1959, Garland's liver had taken such a beating that her health took a turn for the worst. The doctors told Garland she was seriously ill, and they gave her about 5 years or less to live. To hear this said out loud gave Garland an overwhelming sense of relief. The pressure was off of me for the first time in my life. As Garland slowly lost control of her life, Garland owed over $500,000 to the IRS, and the federal tax agents were hot on her heels. Completely desperate, she sold her home for far below its actual worth. Even then, troubles kept coming. In 1966, Judy Garland met Mickey Deans at her New York City hotel. A mutual friend had told him to deliver a package of amphetamines to her, but when he realized that her children were present, he wisely pretended to be a doctor. For the next couple years, these two became on and off lovers. Finally, in 1969, he decided to make it official and asked for her hand in marriage. But unbeknownst to the happy couple, Garland had very little time left. Nearing the end of her life, Mickey Deans tried his best to promote Judy Garland's fading career, but soon found that her severe addiction issues was the greatest obstacle of all. On June 22, 1969, Deans made a shocking discovery in the bathroom of their rented home. Judy Garland had passed. She was only 47 years old. Judy Garland had accidentally taken too many pills, but many experts believed that there were other contributing factors. Some claimed she had cirrhosis. Whatever the case, Judy Garland's personal demons and rigorous life had taken its toll. For the world of entertainment and beyond, her passing was a devastating loss. If you enjoyed this Factinate video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more incredible stories. Want to say in who we cover next? Join our membership program through the link in the description for exclusive perks. Your support means everything to us. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.